Well, welcome to Chapter 3. This chapter includes a lot of information compressed into a relatively short narrative. It would be possible to spend an entire chapter on some topics like performance appraisals. However, time is limited, and you should at least walk away with an understanding of the relationship between the various base pay increase programs, performance appraisals, and strategic plans of the organization. But make sure you study the information in this chapter carefully because it's important. Because there is so much information in this chapter, it tends to be complex and comprehensive. But as with many other topics, this complexity is really pretty simple at its base. In this lecture, I'll attempt to boil this down to a few basic premises. To simplify, I'll back up a little bit and return to our discussion of the battle for the buck. You see, the battle's over, and regardless of whether HR has won or lost the battle, we have a barrel of money, or if HR lost, we have a pot of money to distribute. How are we going to distribute this money? Do we give everyone the same amount, or do we give people different amounts? And what mechanism do we use to facilitate this distribution? How do we distribute these funds year after year says a lot about our organization. It says a lot about our organizational values, beliefs, and our culture. Think about that as you read through this material in this chapter. If you're considering working for an organization, but want to understand the organizational cultures, values, and beliefs, ask how they grant pay increases year after year. Think about that while you're reading this chapter as well. Also understand that there's not a right or wrong answer or a right or wrong system. It depends on the organization. But I have a preference, as do others, and we may disagree as to the best way to distribute the results of the battle for the buck. My goal in this chapter is that you understand the advantages and disadvantages to the point that you also can develop a preference. Actually, this is my goal in each session. And with those individual preferences known, recognized, and acknowledged, you will better understand what organizations you want to join and what organizations you want to avoid. And that choice will define your career. And if you don't define your career, others will. So you can take control with knowledge and understanding. So let's start defining those preferences now. Chapter 3. Now that we have established the importance of compensation and benefits to organizational success, at least I hope we've established that, let us turn our attention to how do we manage compensation. Our employees all have a base rate of pay that was established depending on their job, and we'll talk about how to establish that base rate in a later chapter. And we all agree that different jobs should be paid differently based on various factors defining that group of tasks we call a job. Going back to our battle for the buck, as a human resource specialist responsible for compensation, the company hands you a barrel of money each year to dispense to employees to increase their base pay. As a manager in any department, the human resource specialist in turn hands you a smaller but significant bucket of money each year to dispense for pay increases within your own department. How do we dispense that money? That's our problem. Sounds pretty simple. Just divide it up. Wouldn't it be easy if that's all there was to it? Unfortunately, those nasty issues such as responsibility and leadership and strategic planning and equity and fairness and need and market competition for labor, etc., all get in the way. Oh, and one other nasty concept called consistency. You see, we have to have a plan or system to dispense this money, and it has to be somewhat consistent over time. It also needs to be fair in the eyes of employees. So it needs to be a plan that will make everyone happy about everything all the time. Simple, right? Are you ready to surrender yet? We need a plan to manage compensation and determine how we're going to spread the money each year. And we need to determine how much to distribute to everyone, each and every individual. We need a strategy. And our compensation strategy is not just a high-level word hung on a plaque on the wall. Our compensation strategy goes down to each and every employee in the organization. It touches everyone. Remember, it's not a matter of do we spend money on compensation. It's only a matter of how much we will spend and how effective those expenditures will be. And just like anything else in life, you get what you pay for. And organizations of all sizes pay a great deal to compensate workers. How much do organizations generally pay? Well, it depends, but the following website gives some insight to that question. They throw out numbers between 15 and 30% of gross income for small businesses, or up to 50% for service organizations. It's a short article, so take a quick look to understand the importance of pay to business success. It varies greatly by industry and business, but none of the expenses are insignificant. We are talking big money. And when we talk big money, we are talking big money coming out of a limited source of revenue. How we spend those limited financial resources is a critical decision for most organizations. Unfortunately, pay often receives little more than passing consideration in the strategic plan of the business, and we are often content with doing just enough to get by. Time to drag out my soapbox and give my understated, meek opinion once again. Let me say this gently. Pay is not an expense. It is an investment. That said, we must understand one more important pay fact. Most investments are optional. With my personal money, I don't have to make an investment if I don't want to. I choose to do so. In organizations, pay is not optional. Pay is mandatory unless you can find an entire population of employees willing to work for free. Since that is unlikely, organizations must spend a substantial amount of money paying employees. The money will leave the organization. Will it be spent or will it be invested? As an organization, are we paying too much? Are we paying too little? If we pay just a little more, would there be a positive impact on our success? If we paid differently, would we use our dollars more wisely? Are we currently spending wisely or foolishly? These are questions that must be asked when setting up a pay system, but also must be asked each year while we maintain the system we have already set up. These are questions I hope to help you understand so you can ask them appropriately in your companies. To ask them properly, you must buy into the fact that pay is not an expense, pay is an investment. As I indicated in the previous chapter, if we view pay as an expense, the answers to the questions are very different, and we have a very different looking and functioning company. Do we have a company that accepts mediocrity and embraces just enough, or do we have a company that strives for excellence? As the text points out, there are actually multiple mechanisms that an organization can use to distribute funds consistently through compensation. From a simplistic viewpoint, there are really only two ways additional funds can be distributed, equally or unequally. We can take this barrel of money and divide it equally among employees. Everyone gets an equal share, often called across-the-board increases. Or we can take that money and distribute it differentially based on some criteria, seniority, longevity, merit, performance, etc. Many of you may be thinking that equal distribution is the only fair way to ensure that everyone gets a fair share. Fairness becomes the prevailing goal. But let's just examine this further. It's really not only an either-or choice. It's actually on a continuum with equal pay distribution on one end and unequal pay distribution on the other. In defining the two ends, equal pay means everyone gets the same amount in terms of pay increase, usually at the same time. Pay based on some other criteria, like performance, means pay increases are strictly based on job or organization performance, and some get much more than others, and some may actually get zero increase. As I said, there are a lot of options between these 2 points. But let's start this discussion with an assertion on my part that if we are going to grant increases on the left end of the scale or equally, our pay distribution issue is rather simple. We merely have to determine how big our fund is and if the distribution is going to be equal amount of money or an equal percentage of money. Understand, you can't have both an equal amount and an equal percentage. If you have an equal amount of money, it's an unequal percentage. And if you have an equal percentage to everybody, it's an unequal amount because everybody's making a different amount of money. Isn't it ironic that there is actually inequality while seeking equality? Once we make those two decisions, we merely divide that by the number of employees and determine the amount or percentage to grant each employee. And we take this route, performance management and performance appraisals are much less important to the organization. Problem solved. It also follows that using equal pay, compensation programs, and structure have less impact on the functioning of the organization. Compensation is not a reward or punishment, but a method of keeping up with the Joneses or keeping pace with the marketplace, where you're paying only for tasks performed and not the ancillary actions or benefits such as innovation and drive and initiative and dedication and loyalty and knowledge and skill, etc. Now, I don't believe in equal distribution because we are not equal as people. The difference in these two positions are not just differences in methods and techniques. They represent fundamental differences in how we see the world. I am not a strong believer in equality. I believe equality can never be achieved because we all are inherently unequal. Those on the opposite end of that continuum believe equality can be achieved, or at least it should be a goal that has prominent priority in everything we do. And this strong belief in equality leads to a strong belief that individuals are entitled to a certain base level of something. People are entitled to education, to health care, to minimum wage, etc. And these entitlements are often expressed very specifically. I believe, representing the other side, that entitlements are much more general and decidedly not specific. I believe that people are entitled to equal opportunity, for example. Therefore, when confronted with the question of how to distribute compensation funds, those on the equality end of the continuum jump to ensure that equality is the primary goal, since all are entitled to a certain level of compensation or share of revenue. Those on my side jump to measuring those amenities such as dedication, dependability, loyalty, skill, knowledge, etc., to find a meaningful way to distribute the revenue share. And in that quest, my side is willing to accept a great inequality in the distribution. And that is where those on the equality side start making some of their points. How much inequality of distribution is acceptable, and how do we measure the amenities that define the inequality? And more importantly, who's doing the measuring? Now, these concerns are not based on paranoia, they are based on experience. Situations where the amenities affected included things such as sex and race actually happened in the workplace. It's called discrimination. Situations where the measuring and those doing the measuring were influenced by how cooperative or friendly or submissive an employee was to management are abundant. And many of these inappropriate considerations are invisible. We can't see or prove them, but we strongly suspect that they're in play. How do we negate these inappropriate considerations? Everyone gets the same. Equality is their answer. So what's the answer? Should we distribute funds equally, or should we base the distribution totally on performance? Well, as you might expect, after years of experience in the field, I have found the answer. I don't know. I suspect I have the right answer, but I really don't know. Of course, I always expect I have the right answer. I also suspect that the right answer really depends more on how you do it more than what you do. The right answer in one organization is decidedly the wrong answer in another organization, and the right answer in one point in time is decidedly the wrong answer at another point in time. Performance appraisals, as discussed in the text, have been linked to annual increases in pay for many decades in a large number of organizations. That doesn't mean they were effectively linked, but that they were linked. Recently, some have advocated disengaging performance appraisals from the compensation system. They argue, quote, "We all know that performance reviews are demoralizing to both employers and employees. However, it seems like we are stuck in a rut as we don't know what to do the alternatives would be," end quote. This is from the following website. I don't think performance reviews are demoralizing to good employees, nor are they demoralizing if they are conducted correctly. And finally, the following website is adamantly against pay for performance and represents a spirited argument with an example of a company culture that evolved in that direction. Quote, performance reviews that are tied to compensation create a blame-oriented culture. It's well known that they reinforce hierarchy, undermine collegiality, work against cooperative problem solving, discourage straight talk, and too easily become politicized. They're self-defeating and demoralizing for all concerned. Even high performers suffer because when their pay bumps up against the top of the salary range, their supervisors have to stop giving them pay raises regardless of achievement. End quote. Now, some of this argument I can agree with, but I believe that much of this argument is against implementing and using faulty performance appraisal systems more so than linking performance to pay. If performance is linked to pay based on ineffective performance appraisals or executed by managers unskilled in feedback and leadership, of course they will be detrimental and fail. Effective linkage of pay and performance is complex and dependent on many variables, including effective management skills. Once again, if we distribute our funds equally to the left side of the continuum, then performance appraisals and some of performance management and compensation becomes less important. The issues disappear. But as we move towards the right side of the continuum, or towards pay for performance, the importance of performance appraisals and performance management becomes infinitely more important. Actually, important is an understatement. It becomes critical. Assuming we can develop or enhance a performance management system, I believe that not having pay linked to performance is an injustice to good performing employees and forces the organization to trust that good performance will merely happen. It states that an organization will accept performance and not manage performance. Is pay linked to performance a reward versus punishment issue? You bet it is, and I believe that reward punishment has some merit. Those who perform should be rewarded, and those who don't should be punished. The punishment is in the form of withholding rewards that others receive. Sounds harsh, but isn't that how we learn? Isn't that how we improve? During this portion of the discussion, I will use the book High Performance Pay by Patricia K. Zingham and J.R. Schuster as a frequent reference. Rather than repeat this over and over, I'll merely reference the book, and you know who my source is. There is a distinction between performance management and performance appraisal. Performance management is defined as a series of activities designed to ensure that the organization gets the performance it needs from employees. Performance appraisal is defined as a process of determining how well employees do their jobs relative to a standard and communicating that information to them. Both of these definitions come from Human Resource Management by Robert Mathis, John Jackson, Sean Valentine. In other words, performance management is a broad topic and performance appraisal is just a tool used in performance management. Performance management is not performance appraisals. The book states, quote, "It is important to remember that performance management is much more than a forms design exercise. If you have a solid performance management process, the forms document it. It is the goal setting, the feedback, coaching, review, discussion, and exchange of performance information that makes for top-notch performance management," end quote. Unfortunately, I believe that many performance management systems are merely paper. The goal of many managers is to complete the form so they don't get in trouble, to complete the form so that an employee will get a raise, or to complete the form so they can check another box off of their to-do list. I realize that this is harsh, but my point is that managers have many goals other than participating in a strong and effective performance management system. During the feedback part of the performance appraisal, their goal is to get out of the room rather than share information with employees that could enhance career growth, positive contribution to the organization, and improve performance. I think performance management in many organizations is a mess. How do we create or modify our performance management system to support pay for performance? How do we create a system that ultimately transforms pay from an expense to an investment in improving performance in the organization? Well, first, we accept certain realities. Our performance management system will value some employees more than others. We will not be vested in equality. In fact, we will work hard to not let equality interfere with our treatment of employees. But inequality will be defined by performance and not by race or sex or religion or any of the other protected classes. We will accept the fact that poor performing employees will be defined as such by clearly communicated standards. Poor performing employees will be released from the organization after a reasonable opportunity for rehabilitation. Strong performers will be highly valued and receive rewards commensurate with their contribution. Average employees will be highly valued as well, but will be told that they are average and that they are valued. There will be no doubt among employees of their status of poor, average, or strong performer. These actions will be foremost in our culture as a function of honesty rather than a pursuit of organizational profit and success. Such honesty is our obligation and our primary obligation to employees. We are not obligated to protect employees' feelings or self-esteem. We also must trust employees to act maturely on honest feedback. So where do I stand? I've worked in many different organizations with compensation systems ranging from equal distribution to pay for performance. I absolutely prefer pay for performance. However, I understand the other side of the issue, and you should find your own preference regardless of my views. I hope this discussion has shed a different light on the pay issue and has prompted you to think through the relevance of pay to the success of the organization. And I'm sure we will continue this discussion in the discussion forum. Be thinking about your preferences and your questions and your concerns and your conclusions. They will help define your career. Next week, we will discuss another variation of using that barrel of money. We will discuss incentive pay.